Hello, Ted here with Whole Latte Love. I have a couple of Gaggia Classic Pros here in front of me, and in this video we're going to discuss boiler removal and replacement in case you need to do so. And the reasons why you would need to do this, it could be mainly two things. One, you tried to clean your solenoid valve out because you weren't getting flow out of the group head. There was scale in it, you got it cleared out, it worked for a bit, or it didn't work right after you did that, and you probably have more scale in the boiler as these are showing here. And so you either need to, one, take out the boiler and clean out the scale if you can. If it's got heavy buildup in it, you're better off just replacing the boiler itself.
What's heavy buildup, Ted?
Heavy buildup, I mean, these two are good. I mean, I've seen worse than this, but these are just examples on the kind of buildup, on the different kinds of scale that can build up in your boiler. I've seen a lot more buildup in them where it's like really thick and heavy in there, or balls of clusters and whatnot. And you know, depending on the amount of scale that's in there, like if you have just a small amount of like clusters that are in there, you can clean it out. Usually I tip the boiler upside down and put descaler in it with the valve shut, and then just kind of let it sit there for a bit. And then I'll take a wire brush and I'll scrub the scale out of the walls of the boiler.
The idea is you really got to get that out. You know, if you had a plug solenoid, because it's just going to plug again.
Yeah, if you have this kind of a buildup in there, what's going to happen is that scale is going to break off over time, like it did, and plug up your solenoid valve. And you might have a little pile of scale in your group head at the bottom of the boiler. So that is going to continually get into your solenoid valve. So you're better off taking this off, cleaning it out if you can, or replacing it and then cleaning any scale that might be sitting in your group head after you get the boiler off.
And you've got another boiler up there that's got a little issue, right?
Yeah, the other reason you would need to replace the boiler is if you left water in the machine, say you stored it somewhere where you had freezing temperatures, or you have it in a vacation home that hit, you know, in wintertime it gets really cold and whatnot. So what happens is water will freeze inside this boiler and it will expand and then pop the boiler right here. Because this is all bolted down to the group head, so the water has nowhere to go other than breaking the boiler.
Sure.
And it always breaks right here. And you can always tell, like if you pop the top off and you got water coming out around the group head, instead of inside the group head and it's coming out around it, you're more than likely got a cracked boiler. And you can pop the top off and you can run water in it real quick and you can see water coming out from the sides around here, or you can actually see a bead of water coming off of this crack. It might not look like it's cracked because it's still being held together.
Right.
Another key indication that your boiler is cracked is if your steam knob is up a little bit and now the knob is rubbing on the opening. Okay. Just a little hint.
Something shifted in there.
So if it popped, it's lifted the boiler a little bit and now your steam knob is actually rubbing on the opening, and you're going to scar up your knob from that opening.
Okay.
So this would be a reason why you would need to change your boiler, of course, now because you can't use it. It would be really hard to make an espresso with a cracked boiler, but
the boilers aren't real expensive, right?
No, they're around, I want to say around $25, $30, something like that. You know, so, and it's really not a difficult job. I mean, it's slightly different on the Pro than the original Classic, only because there's more stuff in the way. And I'm going to show you how to get to it and take it out and replace it if you need to.
Well, if we're ready, let's go.
Okay, so one thing you want to make sure is if you do need to replace the boiler, you're going to want to buy a new boiler. And this is what a new boiler looks like. You can see there's nothing built up in there. This one is actually taken off a machine. That's why I have this black mark from an O-ring, so I could use it for an example. But the boiler is nice and clean, and that's what you want.
Sure.
And you want an O-ring that goes between here and the group head.
Okay.
And then there's another O-ring, which I didn't bring with me, but it's the one on the steam valve. It's more round when it's new. It gets deformed when it gets pressed into that right there.
Okay.
So this is just an example, but you will need this O-ring, that O-ring, and a boiler.
Okay. So what do we got to do here?
All right, so what we got to do, let me move these guys out of the way, is we're going to take the top off, make sure your machine is unplugged, make sure you remove everything, tanks, water tray,
decompression
funnel, everything you can remove just to keep it out of your way and not drop anything or anything like that.
Okay.
Make sure your machine is cooled down because you don't want to touch the boiler when it's hot. I've done it, but I'm used to it, so I know how to handle a hot boiler. but it's not comfortable if you grab it and you forget that it's hot.
And you've maybe done, what, hundreds, thousands of these?
Yeah, I've been here about 12 and a half years, so I'm known for the classics. I've repaired a bunch of them throughout the years. I repair a bunch of other machines too, but I know these machines really well.
So those 2 screws in the back there?
Yep, so you take these 2 screws, they may come out of the plastic or not.
Or stay in there.
As long as it unscrews from the metal back here, you're fine.
Good.
And then you're gonna pull it back like that and pull it out of that seat right there for the front lid.
Okay.
And you're gonna pull it out of the machine. And then you got these 2 wires. They have a little spring clip on the inside here, a little nipple looking thing here. And we're gonna push down on that and pull back on the wire.
Okay.
Push down and pull back. And we're gonna set that lid off to the side.
And we don't have to worry about which terminal that went to?
Nope, they're ground connectors and they can go to either one.
Okay.
So now we're going to, this is the boiler and everything we need to get out of the way so we can pull the boiler out.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing I do is I move these switches out of my way, just to give me a little bit more room in there. And in order to do that, you need a Phillips screwdriver. Sorry, I should have said this at the beginning. You need a 17mm wrench. You need a flat blade screwdriver to assist with certain things. You don't need it to unscrew anything. A pair of pliers, needle nose I used to remove a spring clip in there. And then I have an assortment of Allen head tools. I use these, but if you don't have them, you can get the L-shaped ones. Or if you have bits, you can use it on a ratchet. But you want a 4 and a 5mm Allen wrench tool of some sort.
Okay.
That's basically all you're gonna need. So I'm gonna grab my flat blade and we're gonna pull these switches out of the housing. And in order to do that, you gotta push down on these tabs. There's a tab on each side of the switch on the top and the bottom. We're not gonna worry about the bottom right now because I'm gonna try to get it out without trying to fight and get underneath there. So you're gonna push on this tab on one side and then you're gonna push on the switch just to get it popped out a little bit right here.
Yep. Okay.
And you're going to do that to the same side as you're pushing on the back of the switch. Now you can see that this thing is popped out like that.
2 of those little tabs like that.
Which is going to give you enough room to put your flat blade screwdriver underneath and push on one tab and twist.
And twist.
Push on the other tab and twist. Now you can pull your switch out.
And not to worry about scratching anything.
Yeah, as long as you get up underneath here, you're not going to do any damage to it. Just be careful when you do go underneath there and not scratch your machine as you're doing it. But yeah, just go up in there, push and twist, and it'll pull it right out.
And the same deal on the other 2?
Yep, we're going to do the same thing to the other 2. I usually go through all 3 of them on the top and get them out just enough. And we'll do this one like that.
Okay.
And then I'll do the same thing on the underside, go up underneath and just twist like that and like that.
Easy.
Now, these should pop back in, we'll get to that, but if you do have a problem with them seating in, these little plastic things right here, you can actually put like a little point or something underneath this top
and kind of push
pipe here. You can kind of push it up just a little. Don't put a lot of force in it because you can actually break them off.
Just kind of bend it up a little bit.
Yeah, and that'll help block it in a little bit better if you have that problem.
Okay.
So now we're going to remove wires. We're also going to remove this steam arm. We'll do that first. You're going to grab your 17mm wrench. You're going to put it on that nut. And my hand is going to be a hammer, and you're just going to hit it that way a little bit. And it'll help break it free. And then you might have to unthread with the wrench, but if you feel that it's loose enough, you can undo it with your fingers.
So machine's been around for a while. It might be a little...
Yeah, it could be a little tough or not.
More. Sure.
Just feel it out with the wrench, and then you're going to pull this arm off.
Okay.
And then we can actually pull it out of the machine and get it out of the way.
Okay.
So let's set that off there. Now this is where you need to keep track of your wires. You can either label them, you can take a picture with your camera on your phone or something like that, write it down. Whatever you got to do to remember where these wires go to is very important to make sure everything gets plugged back in correctly. As you can see, I've already had my element connections labeled. That's the way I always do it. And all the other wires, I know where they go, so I don't have to worry about it.
But for other folks,
well,
take
for other
a picture,
people, yeah, make sure you
label them,
or keep track of them somehow. So we're going to unplug these wires to the elements.
Those just pull right off. Huh?
Yep, the little post with the peg connectors on them. And we're just going to pull those out like that.
Okay.
Now, we have these two we need to unhook, and sometimes they are a little difficult. You just got to wiggle and pull them off.
Okay.
That one came off easily. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. And it doesn't matter which way you put these two wires back on, but if you want to make, have it go back the same way it came off, then you can, definitely do that. And then this wire here, we can actually unscrew that screw right there.
Now it's holding down that thermal fuse, right?
Yep, it's a thermal fuse holder, which is connected to a ground. And just to get that out of the way, we just got to unscrew that.
And you got your magnetic tip
Yep.
screwdriver there.
Magnetic tools are the best. If you need screwdrivers, make sure they have magnetic tips. They'll help you with everything. And so now we can actually move this thermal fuse out of the way. We're just going to pull that up out of the way, being careful not to bend it too much because you want to break the wire on either side of this thermal fuse.
You get through all this, that wire's broken. Your machine's
Yeah,
not
then you got to
it.
replace the thermal fuse.
Okay, so be careful with that.
Yeah, and then the last thing we got to do wire-wise is this thermostat down here. That is your brew thermostat. We got to remove those two wires.
Okay.
And the trick is to use the flat blade screwdriver. And we're going to go down and get behind one of the switch or the connectors and just twist and pop it off.
Okay.
Now, depending on the angle of these, you might not be able to do that because I've had it where like this connector was facing up and I couldn't get underneath it.
Sure.
You just got to fight with it and pop it off.
Okay.
But your flat blade screwdriver will be a very helpful tool to pop those off.
Now, does it matter which one?
Nope, same with that one.
Okay.
As long as they're connected on either side, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay.
So now we got the wires disconnected. The only thing we have to do now is remove this spring clip off that tube.
Okay.
And that's where your needle nose pliers come in. We're going to squeeze on that clip and pull it up the line. And then I'm going to grab the line itself and pull up on it.
Okay.
Just to get that disconnected. And we're going to push this off to the side somewhere. Keep in mind that this might slide down the tube and go down further. You'll have to just fish it back up. But if you can keep it from sliding down, that'll make your life easier.
Sure.
All right, so now we've removed everything that's basically connected to the boiler, other than the steam valve and then the bolts that are holding it to the group head.
Okay.
So we're going to remove the steam valve with our T5 or our 5mm Allen head wrench. And my tool is like this really long handle one, which gives me a better leverage on it. And they might be difficult at first, but once you get them broke free,
They come out pretty easy.
they spring out pretty easily.
Nice.
And that, there we go. So now we can, depending on how long it's been in there, you can get lucky and pull it out really easily. You might have to wiggle it back and forth and pull it out. You might be able to use channel locks and wiggle it back and forth and pull it out. Whatever you can do to get this steam valve up and out of your way.
So you might have to put a little leverage on that to get it to go. Okay.
So now that is removed. The only thing we have left to do is the 4 bolts holding the boiler onto the group head.
Okay.
That's where your T5 comes back in. And you're just gonna, right now you're just gonna break all 4 of them free.
Okay.
And if you had used your machine, you're probably gonna have water still in the boiler.
So you're gonna have some water falling out of there?
Yeah, depending on if that seal is still stuck between the 2 pieces, you might not have it come out right now. I like to break them all free just to get them going like that.
Okay.
And then if they start leaking, you can put something underneath here to catch the water that will come around it eventually.
But it's not going to end up in any electronics in there that's going to hurt anything? Okay.
No. But what I do,
It's going to make a mess.
Yeah, it might make a mess. Most times it doesn't start leaking until you get all the screws out and you move the boiler.
Okay.
And I'll show you what you can do when it gets to that point. So now that I got all screws loose, I'm going to remove all the bolts. And you can see I'm using my finger to reach down and kind of hold the bolt with the tool.
Makes it easier to get it out.
So I can bring it out with it.
Sure.
If you can't do that, it's not a big worry. You can actually just leave them in there
and
then move your boiler about and take it out that way. Now you got your bolts all undone. If you still, like we have water leaking out right now actually because there's water in the boiler.
Sure.
And this was a machine I played with the other day, so the seal isn't creating a good seal right now anyway. now that it's separated. But if you have water in your boiler, you're going to want to move the machine over to a source like a sink and kind of tip it forward so all the water is going to run to the front of the machine in here.
Okay.
When you separate this boiler.
Okay. So you just
So I just pulled it up and broke the seal.
Okay.
So all the water is draining out of here now, which isn't a lot, but it's enough to make a mess on your counter if you don't do this. So, and then I tip it to one corner to get all the water to funnel out and get as much of it out as I can.
Okay.
So now we have all the water out. I can move it back over here. And now I can pull the boiler out. You can work around the loose stuff that's around it, and now you have the boiler out. Now, oops, sorry.
Yep.
That screw I forgot was still in there.
Yep.
So this is the seal, and sometimes it will come with the boiler. Sometimes it will stay in that groove down there.
Okay.
In the groove head. Either way, make sure you remove it and just throw it away.
Because you're going to put a new one in. Okay.
You can see this boiler is not in bad shape. It's been around for a little while, and it's got a little scale built up here, but nothing real major down in here. This would be definitely a doable clean. You know, the descaler and clean it out.
Okay.
And then you can reinstall it.
Okay.
You don't have to get a new one. But if you need a new one, we'll put the new one in. Now, when you put the new one in, the other thing you're going to have to do is these thermostats. 17 millimeter. You remove these. You just break them free. It doesn't take much. Now they're both loose.
Now, is it the same rated thermostat on both, or we got different ones going here?
The top one here is your steam thermostat. That's a higher rating for temperature.
Okay.
That's, you know, it knows when to kick on and off for your steam temperature.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that goes back on to the top of the boiler. That's why I usually set them next to each other so I don't mix them up. If I happen to mix them up, there is labeling on the side of them. One says 107 or something like that, and the other one has a lower number rating on it.
Lower number down there?
Yep, this is
lower
your
number
brew.
Down low.
Yep.
Hey, look at that.
This is your brew thermostat. That's what controls your temperature to have brew temp. And you might get this white stuff on your fingers like I am right here. Don't worry, it's just called thermal paste. It creates a better, you know, heat sink with the metals.
Conducts the heat better to the thermostat. Okay.
So
now, do you ever need to like add any, or you got enough on there?
Usually, there's enough on the thermostat that when you remove them, you put them on the new boiler, and then there's usually enough there.
Okay.
And then you wipe your hands off or wash them or whatever you want to do.
Sure.
So now we got the thermostats on here. Now we can reinstall the boiler.
Okay.
But first, make sure that you clean out the group head area. If you have a pile of scale or something laying down in there, you can just kind of pick it up with a paper towel, dry it out. You can vacuum it out. After it's dried up, you can try to remove whatever you can from that group head area down there.
Okay.
Okay.
And how's this one looking?
This one looks good.
Okay. All right, good.
Sometimes it'll be built up on this tube. You can use a wire brush or something like that and kind of clean that up a little bit. You know, you just want to try to remove whatever you can to prevent it from falling off and plugging up your solenoid valve, if that's the problem. So now we have the boiler out. We got our thermostats on there. When you finger tighten these down, you just want to take and put your wrench on here and just kind of give it a little turn.
Okay. Not super hard?
Nope, you do not want to do that, because that was one of my mistakes when I first started working on these 12 years ago. There's a little brass shaft on the end of those. You crank on them too hard, it's going to break it right off of that shaft. Now you need to replace your boiler again unless you can drill out a really tiny thread. Yeah, it's not fun. I had to do that.
You learned the hard way.
I learned the hard way, and I just crank just a little bit just to hold the thermostat in place.
Okay.
So now we can put this back in. We get our seal. We'll place that down in here.
A little channel that it drops into there?
Yep, usually it fits right in there. You just kind of want to walk it around and check to make sure it's seated in there.
Okay.
And then we're going to take our boiler. Now before I actually attach it in there, you can see I can grab these two wires.
Hold them up and...
It makes it a lot easier to reattach to that thermostat on the side here, instead of having the boiler in there and then fighting with it.
Oh, and again, it doesn't matter where these go.
Nope. So I like to reattach these wires first to make my life a little bit easier. And now I just work it in and around everything and get it to go over, because you got this post that's off to the one side, so you kind of got to figure out and get it over it.
Okay.
Once you get over it, now you can drop it down in there.
And that's the orientation of that flat side towards the front of the machine?
Yep.
Right? Is that the only way it can go?
Yeah, I mean, it can go the other way, but now your thermostat's gonna be facing
Yeah.
this way, and then you're, whatever. So once you get it generally in the general location, you can see the 4 holes that it's supposed to line up with. Now we're gonna take our bolts. I attach it to the tool here, and I kind of hold the boiler and push it against the boiler as I'm guiding it down.
It's tough to get your finger down on there
Yeah.
to keep it.
And then I start it in the hole.
Okay.
And then I don't tighten it all the way, because we need to get all 4 bolts in there. So I'm going to use the edge of the boiler, guide it down, and slide it over. It's a little tricky to doing it, but I've done it so many times I can probably do it with my eyes closed. But if you have a problem with it, just keep trying. If you have another way you can figure out how to do it, go ahead and do it. But this is the way I do it. So I go until it kind of stops.
That last one.
And that last one, you get it down in there. So now we just got to tighten these bolts down. And the way I like to explain tightening these bolts down, and I know a lot of people aren't going to understand this, but if you ever replace the tire on your car, you got to go in a star pattern on your bolts when you're tightening them all up. So I start with one corner, go to another corner, and then go to the other corner in like an X pattern.
Yeah.
And I tighten it down as much as I can at first until it stops. And then I'll go back through and crank on it and make sure it's nice and tight.
So you give it a pretty good crank on those.
Yep. You just want to make sure that seal is compressed between the group head and the boiler.
Okay.
And once you get that feel that it's nice and tight, you don't have to worry about it now.
Okay.
So we have our 2 wires already attached to that thermostat, because we did it before we put it in. Otherwise, you'd have to sit here and fight and squeeze your hands and fingers and tools or whatever you can to get it on there. We can actually attach this hose if we want to right now.
Okay. It's going on top of the solenoid there.
Yep. So we're going to push that down and around. And this hose, I mean, it can be on either side, it doesn't matter.
The clamp there?
The water tube right here.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes it'll be on this side or that side, it doesn't really matter. As long as nothing's like really kinked up. We're going to grab that spring clip, squeeze, and push down.
Beautiful.
Now it's on there, so when your solenoid valve releases the pressure, it ain't going to blow it off. We can put our steam valve on, which is this guy. And again, the new O-ring you're going to want to put on here. You can see this one is actually pretty new, because this is the one I did another video with.
Yep.
So put this on the shaft first. And if you want, you can actually take the knob off.
Make it easier.
And we can put that on after the fact.
Okay.
So we're going to feed that into the opening over here and drop it into the top section here.
Okay.
And then we're going to put our 2 bolts into that. Start one, kind of get it almost down all the way, so you can line up the other one and kind of get that one almost tight. Now this is where you're going to use the steam valve and position it correctly with your steam knob. So we're going to put the knob on, because if you had tightened these down before putting the knob on, it might be off one way or the other, and then you might not be able to put your knob on, or it'll be rubbing against the opening.
Okay.
So you want to put the knob on before you're tightening and kind of position it in the correct spot.
Kind of center up that knob in the hole there, right? And hold it in place.
Yeah, because if you don't have it right, it'll start rubbing and cause it to scratch up the knob, make it a little bit more difficult to move it, depending on the position. So we're just going to start tightening these down as the knob is being held in position. And now that I got it nice and tight where I ain't got to worry about it moving, I'm just going to
crank on those.
Tighten them down the rest of the way until you can't really turn them anymore.
Okay.
Now we can put our steam valve or steam arm back in. We're just going to feed this down through the hole that it came out of. Right down here. And you might have to maneuver it around to get it to drop in the right spot.
Get that clip through the hole.
Then you get this part and you push it on there. And once you get it on there just enough, you can actually start threading this. Now sometimes this might go on easily. It kind of is and isn't right now. I can turn it. It just depends on the position of this part of the arm and the O-ring that's underneath there. But once you get it on there, if you can't turn it with your finger, just use the wrench once you get it started. And we're just gonna turn this until we get it nice and tight. Now be careful of your element connection here because it's right next to it, so you're gonna wanna be real careful because you can see my wrench is actually sliding off of it as I'm bumping into this. And now we're nice and tight.
Okay.
And if you want, you can wipe off that white stuff. It was on the wrench from the thermostats. It's not gonna hurt anything.
Yeah.
So now we can reattach our wires. We gotta put our thermal fuse back in place.
And again, you want to be careful with that thermal fuse.
Yeah, you wiggle this too much and you might have a chance of breaking the wire in
wires
here.
in there, yeah.
So just kind of be gentle with it for the most part. You can see I'm not real gentle with it, but you'll know when you break it anyway. Or you should. So we're gonna get this in the general location above that so we can at least put our screw in the hole here. And you're going to see I'm going to use this to kind of guide everything down and find the hole that the screw goes into and start that.
Get it in there a little bit.
Yeah, this thermal fuse needs to sit in that little U-shaped channel down there.
Right.
Make sure that your thermal fuse is attached back to the boiler.
Otherwise it's not going to do its thing, right?
Yeah, it's a safety mechanism on the boiler in case the boiler starts overheating for whatever reason. If that is not on there, it doesn't know to cut power off to it. I've seen machines that came in where customers tried to do something to it and they left the thermal fuse hanging out here somewhere, never attached it back to the boiler, which is basically nulling what it's supposed to do.
Right. Okay.
Luckily nothing ever happened because of it, but it's just make sure it's attached.
Right. Okay.
So we got that back on there. Now we can just plug the wires in. We got our element connections here. I already have them labeled. I can start working those on. Get these all connected. Like so. And then our 2 wires to our thermostat. Again, it doesn't really matter which way they go on. I'm a stickler for making sure the wires go back on the same way they came off. So usually I try to leave the formation of the wire.
Okay.
But if you happen to bend things around a little bit, don't worry about it. You can just plug those 2 back in anyway. And now we have everything reconnected. This is our ground wires to the top.
Okay.
We need to put these switches back into place. I start making sure on the back here, I usually try to fish the wires down off to the side, make them as flush as I can against these connectors back here. Reason being is there's not a lot of space between the switches and here.
Okay.
So if they're sticking out just a little bit, like this one's kind of sticking out here, I'll kind of move that off to the side a little bit more if I can. Just try to reposition them.
So you can be fairly aggressive pushing on those without...
Yeah, you don't have to worry about breaking anything.
Okay.
I'm just trying to make sure I have enough space between here and here, because if there's not, it has a tendency to push the button forward. You might have a little bit sticking out.
Okay.
And if that's the case, remove the switch and play with the wires again.
Sure.
So I'm going to push the bottom part of the button in first on all 3 of these.
You kind of hear it.
Okay, like that. And now I can just push the top.
So easy.
And now they're back in. Now, like I said, if there's a wire that's out of place and it pushes again, it'll push the switch, and I can actually show you how
It'll kind of do something like that. Yeah.
So if that's the case, you just pop the switch back out and play with the wires a little bit and then pop it back in.
Okay.
Now we have that done, we can put our top back on. Plug your 2 wires in. Again, it doesn't matter which way these 2 go on here. And then feed the funnel down in a little bit on a slight angle. Make sure your lid goes into this plastic groove here, like that. And then you can't just drop it down. You have to tweak the lid a little bit to get the funnel to go into the opening that it's supposed to.
So you're using your fingers in there to kind of pull that forward.
I kind of like pull back with my fingers as my hand is on the lid to kind of tweak it a little bit so I can get it to drop into the hole that it's supposed to.
Okay.
And then the 2 screws.
Yours stayed in there.
Yep.
So
if they come out, just make sure you don't lose them.
Yep.
Sometimes they come out, sometimes they don't. And then that's it. You've replaced or cleaned your boiler.
Well, you know, replacing a boiler sounds like it's gonna it might be a scary job for some folks, but it's really pretty darn easy.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow the things that I showed you, you shouldn't have any problems. And if you had to change your boiler or clean your boiler due to your solenoid valve getting plugged up, you might have to go back and clean out your solenoid valve again because it might still have that scale in the solenoid valve. But otherwise, you should be good to go.
All right, Ted, thanks for showing us how to do that.
You're welcome.